Good morning. The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Ag and Rural Development and Natural Resources will come to order. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Representative Brixey.
Here.
Representative Martis.
Here.
Representative Pori.
Here.
Representative McKinney.
Here.
Representative Menser.
Here.
Representative Borton.
Here.
Representative Alexander.
Here.
Madam Chair, all subcommittee members are present.
Thank you. Representative Martis moves to adopt the minutes from the prior meeting. There being no objection, the motion prevails. Now we're going to have a presentation from the Department of Natural Resources, new director, Scott Bowen, on the governor's 2025 executive recommendation. Do you guys want to introduce yourself to the committee?
Yes, Scott Bowen, director.
Hi, Jason Crandall, acting budget officer for DNR.
Do you have a presentation for us?
Yes, we do.
Would you like to begin?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Brixey, Vice Chair Martis, Minority Vice Chair Borton, and members of the committee. Thank you for the time to meet with you today and provide an introduction to the Department of Natural Resources proposed budget for fiscal year 2025. I'm DNR Director Scott Bowen. In the short time I've been with the DNR, I've been able to engage with our team of committed workers, embrace the culture, and gain insight into what we do as an agency. Throughout our statewide network of conservation officers, we protect and we serve. We welcome over 35 million visitors a year to our state parks and recreational areas. We manage the largest state forest system in the lower 48 states. We rear and stock tens of millions of fish through our 6 hatcheries to support recreational opportunities throughout Michigan. We're responsible for the protection and management of over 400 species of animals. We actively manage 6 million acres of oil, mineral, and gas rights. Each year, we offer approximately $60 million in grant funding to local units of government and nonprofit partners. We are responsible for making sure Michigan's history and stories are told and preserved for future generations. We don't do it alone. The legislature plays a critical role in the success of our people, our programs, and our natural resources. I'd like to share a few highlights of the proposed budget before you. The governor's budget includes some significant and necessary changes to the Recreational Passport Program, which supports our state parks. First, it recognizes and honors our state's active duty military and honorably discharged veterans by proposing that they have free annual access to our state parks, recreational areas, and boating access sites and trailheads. Second, it looks to address an ongoing backlog of infrastructure, preventative maintenance, and operational needs in our state parks by changing the process associated with vehicle registration from opt-in to opt-out. This was the original proposal proposed back in 2010 when the law was taking shape. The reality is that our 105-year-old park system has over $1 billion in assets and has never been sustainably funded. If you go back to 1970, when the system was much smaller, 68% of the budget came from the general fund. This current fiscal year, 3% of the system's budget is general fund. In the meantime, the system has grown to include 104 state parks, 1,300 boating access sites, 19 harbors of refuge, over 13,500 miles of combined motorized and non-motorized trails, and 350 historical and cultural assets. More people than ever are visiting our state parks. Visits have jumped 32% since the pandemic, and those numbers continue to grow. What's more, state parks are critical to our local economies. They help everyone by bringing visitors into communities across the state. We are making a sizable impact in addressing the backlog of infrastructure needs from the investment provided through the Building Michigan Together plan that you and your colleagues approved. But we need to do more to stabilize funding for this award-winning system. Currently, the recreational passport generates about $42 million annually. Instituting an opt-out model would allow us to offer free access to each of the state's 530,000 veterans and active duty military, and it would generate an additional $17.2 million each year for our state parks. This change would also nearly double the recreational passport grant program that is offered to local units of government. The change to the opt-out model is necessary to the future of our parks. And thank you, Representative Brixey, for bringing that process by introducing legislation to effect this change. A few other highlights to touch on: the budget supports our law enforcement division and our statewide network of conservation officers. Our officers who perform general law enforcement duties and are a critical part of the rural enforcement network. In fact, they are often the first to be on the scene in an emergency in our state's rural areas. You'll see in the recommended budget ongoing funding requests to maintain and replace equipment and technology that is instrumental to our officers, including handheld radios and upgrades to the law enforcement records management system. These are essential communication tools that support our first responders. Finally, I want to touch on a proposed ongoing support of the Nature Awaits program, which is just getting off the ground with its first year of funding this fiscal year. The goal of this brand new program is to get every fourth grade class in the state into a state park, a recreational area, a state forest, or state game area. The program will help connect youngsters with nature at an age when we can make a real difference in their lives. Your support for this and our other budget priorities is appreciated. I want you to know we are committed to working with you to make these important changes to our budget. I'd like to turn it over to Jason Crandall, who will lead our budget team to talk through more of the details.
All right. Again, I'm Jason Crandall, Acting Budget Officer for DNR, and it's a pleasure being with you today. So I'm going to walk through briefly some of the proposed investments in the governor's recommendation for the fiscal year 25 DNR budget. So what you'll see in front of you here is a pie chart just showing kind of how the funding for the DNR is allocated. And what I'd point out here is you'll see that essentially 90% of our funding comes from sources other than general fund. You'll see the biggest pie slice there is going to be your state restricted funding. So that is funding derived from a variety of unique revenue streams. So this would come from license fees from those who hunt and fish and camp, those who snowmobile and ride ORVs. So again, a wide range of revenue sources. That funds the bulk of the budget. You'll see also a pretty significant amount of federal funding too, about 20%. Also would just note that, obviously the DNR employs a wide range of skilled professionals who are critical to the department's success in achieving its mission. Based on the last pay period, DNR has about 1,672 career employees. We also hire a significant number of seasonal and short-term workers, especially in our state parks and recreation areas, over the course of the peak summer seasons. And about 70% of our workforce is union represented. So about the three largest of those unions being the MSEA, SEIU, and UAW. A little bit about some proposed investments. As the director talked about, the governor has proposed an investment related to rec passport opt-out and a resident military exemption for our rec passport. And the intent here is, as the director mentioned, is really to honor our state's military service members providing free annual lifetime access to the Michigan's state parks. So that's one component of the request. And then the other component would be to also basically transition the rec passport program to an opt-out model. And a few things I'll just mention here. So on the first component with the military exemption, obviously there would be, this would provide free access for our active duty military, also for resident veterans. And there is a revenue impact to that. So there would be a loss of revenue, a little over $4 million would be anticipated, the revenue loss from implementing that exemption. But then the other side of the investment here is the opt-out. So again, as the director mentioned, significant assets across our state park system, over $1 billion in assets. And there's still a substantial infrastructure need. So, I mean, if you look across the system, again, 104 state parks, 19 harbors, over 1,000 boating access sites, over 13,000 miles of motorized and non-motorized trails. I mean, the assets are significant. And if you look at the visitation having increased 32%, and I think we're at over 35 million in visitation, I mean, that's a pretty staggering number. And obviously, with the increased visitation, this puts a wear and tear, on our facilities. There's increased maintenance costs. We have had significant investment with one-time ARPA funding. So that has made a difference in helping to address some of the backlog, but we still have a backlog of around $250 million in terms of our infrastructure. And then as you go over time, we continue to add preventative maintenance costs. I mean, roughly $45 million a year in additional preventative maintenance needs for our state parks. And as you know, with inflation, the costs of repairs and maintenance, those just continue to go up. So factor all that in, there's still a significant need to address in terms of our infrastructure for our state parks and recreation areas. So this opt-out piece, we're estimating that would bring in about a little over $21 million in additional revenue. That assumes about a 60% participation. If you look at our current Rec Passport program, with the opt-in model, we're at about a 38% participation. So if you figure roughly 21 in additional revenue, losing about $4 million from the exemption, that gets you to the estimate there of about $17.2 million, which would be kind of the net increase in revenue anticipated with this proposed investment. Just to walk you through a little bit as you look at the governor's rec, how you will kind of see that in the proposed budget. So you'll see that the biggest item there is about $8.6 million in additional revenue for state park capital outlay. So if you were to look in the governor's rec at the state park repair and maintenance appropriation, that's where you see a pretty significant increase there to address that infrastructure need that we just talked about. Also, I just highlight, you'll see a $1.7 million investment there for local public recreation facilities grants. This is the Rec Passport grant program. So this benefits our local parks. And this would nearly double the amount of money available for that grant program for local parks. So again, directly benefiting communities across the state. A little bit about another proposed investment, which is more on our law enforcement side. So this deals with the records management system. This system is used by our COs to track their daily activities. So this could be daily activity reports, incident reports, citation, calls for service. And the current system that we use is the statewide records management system. This is used by several agencies throughout the state. The high volume of use frequently overwhelms the system's capacity, causing slowness. The system often crashes. There often is data loss. And the system also requires internet connectivity, which can be an issue for our COs who work in rural areas where connectivity can be a little spotty at times. And this creates significant issues. I'll just ask you, kind of put yourself in the shoes of a CO here. So, you're a CO, you're going to enter, you need to enter some records into the system, and you go to do that, you're trying to log in, and you get what I'll not so affectionately refer to as the blue circle of death. It spins and it spins. You're waiting to get in. You try to log in. You try to log in a couple different times. You're still waiting. Maybe 15 to 20 minutes later, you finally get into the system. Then when you get into the system's bogged down, so it's extremely slow. You're trying to enter the records that you need to enter, the data. In the process, the system crashes. So you have to start the process over again and log back in. And in the meantime, you realize that the data that you entered, that data was lost. Now you have to re-enter the data that you entered before. This is the type of things that COs are experiencing, and you can imagine it would be extremely frustrating as you're trying to enter this information. It's taking time away from core responsibilities as they're trying to get these records entered in the system. And it's significant performance issues with the current system. So, obviously, this is a area of concern for our COs. I'll just mention a couple different things that came out from a recent survey from our COs. I think this is somewhat telling. In a recent survey of our conservation officers, 85% of officers reporting having had issues with the SRMS, which is the current record system. 80% experienced failures when completing their daily activity reports. 75% reported system crashes and loss of data. Nearly 70% reported connectivity issues, and 74% indicated they experienced issues every time they use the system. So as you can see, this is a significant concern for our CO. So what's being proposed here is a cloud-based vendor-managed solution that would replace that records management system. And the other advantage here, not only in providing better performance, this would also allow for eligible records to be automatically sealed to comply with clean slate laws. This is something, because of the performance issues with our current system, is very difficult to achieve. Another proposed investment is on communications equipment, so modernizing communications equipment here. And what I'd highlight here is that more than half of the radios and modems across the department are beyond the life cycle, manufacturer's recommended life cycle replacement. The proposed investment here is specifically for our fire officers and for our conservation officers. So these are our first responders. They depend on having modern, safe, efficient equipment to perform their necessary duties. You know, having antiquated and inefficient communication equipment, it can delay response time, it limits the ability to communicate with other agencies, and it can put staff and public safety at risk. What is being proposed here is an ongoing investment, you can see $878,300, to provide a life cycle replacement plan for radios and modems for our COs and our fire officers. So what this would do for our COs would allow for the handheld radios that they carry, for those to be replaced kind of over a period of 4 years. Then the modems would be replaced. Then the mobile radios, which are the radios in the trucks, those would be replaced. And then the process would kind of start over again. So a 10-year cycle to keep those radios up to date. Currently, with many of the radios out of warranty, if a radio breaks, they can't get parts, there's just issues, and there's a significant need to upgrade those radios. Again, on the fire side as well, 10-year replacement plan to replace those, roughly 10% a year, to have a life cycle replacement plan to have up-to-date radios for our fire officers who are on the front lines fighting fires. Another proposed investment is kind of on our grant side here. So this is related to Land and Water Conservation Fund. And what this proposed investment would do is it would provide a dedicated position to serve as a liaison of sorts with communities to resolve grant compliance issues. And you can see here a small amount of general fund, roughly $76,000, to leverage additional federal dollars, about a like amount here. And really what this is designed to do, having a dedicated individual to serve in this area. They could perform post-completion compliance reviews. They also would work as a liaison with communities, with the National Park Service, to help resolve and prevent conversion issues. And I would say conversion is when you have a recreation pass or a recreation grant. Essentially, that the grant funding was for providing outdoor recreation benefits. Now that property is being used for some other purpose, and now they're in conversion status. So what does that mean for communities who find themselves in that situation? Well, resolving conversions can be a complex and a tedious process. It disproportionately impacts urban areas because of the demand for economic development. And communities with unresolved conversions, they receive significant point deductions when they apply for other grants, whether it be trust fund, natural resources trust fund, or land and water. And so it makes it very difficult for them to be able to compete or to be able to apply for additional recreation opportunities for outdoor recreation through these grant programs. So, you know, as of January, there were about 102 unresolved conversions across the state. Just to give you an example, there's one community in Southeast Michigan that has a conversion from 1980 or 1995 that they're still attempting to resolve. So there is a need for, again, a dedicated person to work with communities to help them through these issues and serve as a resource in that area. Nature Awaits, just would mention here, this was a significant investment in the current fiscal year for the Nature Awaits program. The idea here, provide fourth graders access to state parks, an opportunity to visit the parks and participate in an outdoor learning session with DNR staff. Really excited about this program. It's going to be kind of kicking off here this spring. We've been gearing up for that, getting lots of interest from educators, lots of questions coming in. So I know we're really excited to get started with this program. Really what this proposed adjustment here, in the current year budget, it was an $8 million investment that was built in. What this attempts to do is to true things up a bit into what the annual need would really be. So roughly $4 million a year. So this would align with that annual budget need for Nature Awaits. A couple of other adjustments related to our fleet. So there is a proposed adjustment to essentially align the budget with increased mileage rates, which are going to be essentially mileage rates will be increasing in fiscal year 25. And this relates to our leased vehicles through DTMB Vehicle Travel Services. And this is just tied to increased fuel and repair costs. So the proposal here is to align the budget to mirror those increased costs that we know will be coming. The DNR has about 1,100 leased vehicles through DTMB Vehicle Travel Services, which is number 3 behind State Police and Department of Health and Human Services. We have a significant number of vehicles, and what you'll note here about just under $900,000 ongoing investment. The general fund piece here would be specifically related to our law enforcement vehicles, providing for those additional costs. Just to highlight another adjustment, which you'll see in the governor's proposed budget, and that is essentially a transfer of spending authorization out of the DNR budget, and that relates to the Archives of Michigan. So in accordance with Executive Order 2023-6, the Archives of Michigan was transferred from DNR to DTMB, and that occurred effective December 1st, 2023. The budget continues to reside in the DNR in the current fiscal year. What is proposed here in fiscal year 25 is to move the spending authorization for the archives from DNR to DTMB. So what you see is a $1.9 million reduction in the budget, reduction of 14.5 FTEs. Also, you'll see a reduction in our property management line, and that's for building occupancy charges. So this would be the space that the archives occupies that would now be paid by DTMB. Just a couple other adjustments to highlight for you. You'll see some other budget adjustments in there, about $120,000 for the Michigan Cashiering and Receivable System. So this is a revenue system that is used to record revenue, used by multiple agencies through the department, or divisions through the department. Basically, RFP went out, a new contract that was in place, increased maintenance and support costs to kind of align with industry standards. So the costs of that contract have increased, and this would provide for those increases. Also, proposed investment related to cultural resource management. Again, not a dollar impact here, just FTE. So this would be looking at basically using our existing authorization to fill a few positions that are needed, 3 archaeologists and a student. And the idea here, so on the cultural resource side, by hiring these positions, it would allow projects in the field to be completed at a lower cost than hiring contractors to do the work. It would also allow dedicated staff, which would provide for quicker response times to prevent delays in parks and other construction projects. Would also just highlight significant capital outlay investments in the budget. We'd already talked about state park repair and maintenance, but you also will see significant investments in state and local boating infrastructure, wetland enhancement and acquisition. And then a few more technical adjustments too to align with revenue, some additional private authority for our forestry area to align with revenue coming in. Same thing on the fisheries side, some additional settlement revenue, need for $100,000 additional authorization there to align with revenue. And you'll see a little bit of a reduction in our Belle Isle sub-account there, a little over $300,000. And that's just to align with revenue, and that just reflects the fact that a little bit less revenue is coming in with the Grand Prix having moved off of Belle Isle. So less revenue coming in for that fund. Now, just round things out by closing with just a few comments here about some FY24 supplementals. So in conjunction with the exec rec, there were a number of supplemental requests that were transmitted to the legislature. I'll just highlight a couple of these items for you. There's a $3.6 million request related to a straight state park, and this would be the Native American History Project. And this is a really exciting investment kind of on the west unit of Straight State Park. A $3.6 million grant was received from the Mellon Foundation, providing private money for this project. The money has been received. We just need the spending authorization to be able to move forward and proceed with this project. And this would provide a learning commons, powwow ground enhancements, really highlight some of the stories of the Native American people who were there when Marquette, and the Father Marquette, that area when he arrived, and just a really cool project that we're excited about. So that's that one. The other one there, the Great Lakes Consent Decree, $2.3 million. What that's connected with, there's a need to purchase and retire a state commercial fishing license that's no longer eligible for use due to the newly enacted Great Lakes Consent Decree. And this decree prohibits state licensed commercial fishing in the Big Bay Denok Management Unit of Lake Michigan. So this $2.3 million proposed investment there would provide for that necessary retiring of that commercial fishing license. It's necessary to adhere to the consent decree. And so that's what that proposed investment details. There's another $1.5 million, which is needed related to Brandon Road. That's the project to prevent invasive carp from entering the Great Lakes. And the last item I just highlight for you there is the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. So over $27 million there for that grant program. Clear benefits to our local communities, a number of acquisition and development projects, again, that we're really excited about as well. So that would be my comments on the budget. Would be happy to address any questions that you might have.
Thank you, gentlemen. Members, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple quick ones, if it's all right. All right, gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate you being here today. My question, though, is for Director Bowen, and it's regarding the recreation passport. First of all, I'm a big proponent of that. I have been getting them, and my wife, both our vehicles get them and have since its inception, and we take advantage of it. We love our state parks. So obviously, we're part of the 38% that are opting in right now. But do you think it's fair to force people to have to pay for it that have no intentions whatsoever of ever utilizing a state park, and then making it burdensome for them to opt out? I don't mind checking that little box and paying my $18 or whatever it is now per year, but I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers to force them to go through a process to try to get their money back if they don't want to partake.
Yeah, thank you. That's a fair question. Forcing them is, I think, a little strong. Representative, we're not forcing anybody. This isn't a tax. You can opt out by filling out a postcard, literally, and mailing it in, and we're going to have postage prepaid. So we'll be sending you a check for $14 if you want to opt out. I think it's more confusing to actually opt in. My mother, who's quite supportive of parks, particularly recently, she is 82, doesn't use the parks. Didn't opt in on her thing, doesn't even use her sticker. She has me put the sticker on, and I'm like, Mom, where's the P? And she's like, I don't go to the state parks. I said, but do you support them? She says, of course. But she didn't opt in, and she's capable of opting in. What we want to do is fleet companies, people who have 2 cars that don't take the second car to the park, anybody who can't afford it, opt out. It's literally a postcard. And I don't think that burden is too much to have world-class funding for world-class parks. It is more burdensome, and that's why we expect more revenue. But the truth is, it's not that big a burden. And if I had my druthers, I'd put it on every car so that we could have more trails and more parks. Right now, this is just designed to fix up and keep the bathrooms clean, the parking lots working, the lights on, the power coming, all the things that we need in state parks. We need this money to keep up with it. And thank God for the ARPA funding that you guys provided last time to get us a real good leg on that process. So I don't think it's too burdensome. I think it's actually the right way. And if you don't do it this way, what other way is there to fund it that's more fair, that you can literally opt out of it? A piece of sales tax? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is beyond asking you to do this.
Yeah, that's probably something we're going to want to have further discussions on. For you and I, it's not much of a burden. unfortunately, my constituents feel it is, and that's who I represent. My other one's a quick one, too. You talked about the issues with the CO's connectivity and unreliable apps. How do you see that any different than what we forced our hunters to deal with when they were forced and tried to say, listen, we don't have connectivity out in the woods. We don't have reliable apps we can use, but they were shown no sympathy whatsoever. But yet, our COs need that. I live in rural northern Michigan. I'm used to having to drive to the library if I want to make sure that I want to connect and do something. So I don't understand why it's such an issue for the COs when we're forcing our hunters to do the exact same thing.
Fair question, sir. I would say that there's 48 hours to fill out your kill tag, and you can do that at home. The leisure of being at home. Our officers don't have that luxury. They're responding to urgent situations, emergent situations, and they need connectivity on the spot. I also agree with you on the hunter obligation in that we've asked them to do more, so we know more. But we've been flexible on how we enforce that, and we're going to get more flexible on how we enforce that. But giving somebody 48 hours to fill that out and be able to return home or to a place where there's reasonable service is one of the reasons that we have that rule that allows for 48 hours. It just doesn't apply to the people in the field who sometimes have an urgent need to connect with the home office.
Yeah, from what I've heard.
Thank you, Vice Chair
All right,
Borton.
thank you.
I'll be happy
Do
to
we
follow up
have,
with you, sir.
we want to keep the conversation focused on the executive recommendation, not other grievances that we have with the department.
Actually, both of what I brought up were from the governor's recommendation.
Do we have any other questions? Representative?
Thank you. First of all, I'm going to say I'm 100% behind the communication equipment modernization. I know what it's like out in the field when you don't have reliable radios or body cams, so I'm 100% behind that. I just had a question about the incident records management system. Are you looking to replace the system completely, the software package completely with like a new vendor, or are you looking at just kind of, somehow, beefing up, the bandwidth or capabilities of the system that you do have? And have you gone out for any bids on that?
No.
All right, so I can address that question. So yeah, this would be replacing the existing system. So this would be not trying to improve or beef up the current system. They have tried multiple times to address some of the ongoing issues with the current system to no avail. So this would be kind of going with a new vendor-managed, cloud-based solution, so a new software solution. Also would include hardware, some integration with our body-worn cameras and other things that would all integrate with this new software solution. So it would be a new solution. No, we have not gone out to bid or anything like that at this point. This is just a proposal in terms of what we're looking for funding for that.
So this is kind of like a long-term project. By the time you put your specs together, go out for bid, review those bids, we're talking quite a bit of time.
Well, I know there's been significant research already done within our law enforcement division in terms of knowing what's out there in terms of potential solutions. So I do not believe implementation would be all that difficult or take all that long.
I was kind of figuring 6 to 8 months at least. But thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate your testimony today. Next, we're going to have a presentation from the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development on the governor's executive recommendation. And we have Director Tim Boring, who was not here last year at our presentation. So, Director, if you'd like to introduce yourself just a moment before you begin your presentation. Thank you.
Certainly. Wonderful to be in front of you all. I have, if we were counting weeks, I think I've been on the job 50 weeks now, maybe something like that. No, I began in early March of last year, so I just missed out on the opportunity to go through the whole budget process and talk with you last year about the MDARD budget. So excited to be part of the department and part of the collective effort here moving ag ahead in the state.
Go ahead with your,
Certainly. We've got Sylvia Renteria with us today, our budget officer here at the department. A little bit of my background. My family farms in the chairwoman's district, as it were. Sixth-generation farm, practicing a lot of regenerative ag practices. Close enough to Lansing that I've been able to spend my career in a variety of different roles within agriculture. So a number of different perspectives of coming from academia and now having the opportunity to work on advancing really the governor's priorities for what Michigan needs through agriculture and working on investments through what we hope to share with you a little bit today of how we have a brighter future for Michigan agriculture ahead. So a few of just the basics of what the department looks like for us. Main high-level goals here. Fundamental work within this backbone of what Michigan does, from our food safety to ensuring environmental sustainability. We have concerted efforts within the department to further economic development, specifically within the agriculture sector, working closely with larger partners like MEDC. But understanding the importance of specifically how we make purposeful investments within agriculture to drive rural and urban communities through the advancement of our food system. And as always, efficient, effective government. Certainly something that bears mentioning every time we talk through these sorts of things. We have around 500 employees at the department, 70% of which who are represented through unions. We have a lot of accomplishments that I could spend the remainder of the time sharing with you, and certainly many that I'm proud of here. A few just top-line efforts here that I think are important to highlight. We've done a lot of work in advancing economic development over the last year. We've obligated grants totaling more than $6.5 million to food companies in rural and urban areas across the state. We've taken some important work with the wastewater infrastructure grant funding, obligating more than $30 million through that effort to work with food processors, food companies to become compliant with increasingly stringent wastewater requirements. Efforts that are needed for robust environmental protection, but as you might imagine, we have a number of long-standing and sometimes aging facilities across Michigan. So we've been supportive of working with companies to comply with upgrading systems in a meaningful way to ensure continued environmental compliance. We do an awful lot of work within the department advancing and protecting public health. We are involved in multiple responses around highly pathogenic avian influenza, chronic wasting disease in the state, rabies. It's amazing the number of different areas that our staff touch the lives of folks and animals across the state of protecting public health. We do a lot of work ensuring food and dairy product enforcement and safety across the state. We do a lot of work in efficient government. We've recently stood up a new grant management program, My Ag Grants. In the last year, we've obligated $20 million to the new online grant management system. It's important work for us to streamline grant applications, the grant process that folks interface with the departments. We take the accountability of taxpayer resources really seriously. And so sometimes that comes with a fair amount of paperwork. So the creation of a new standalone portal like this has really streamlined a lot of those applications. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from that. It's important that it integrates closely with our enterprise IT work in both public-facing and internal systems. So that's taken a fair amount of work in the kind of behind the scenes at MDARDS, but we've been excited to get that up and going. We do a lot of work preserving the environment in ways that you might not always think of. We do a lot of work in invasive pest management, box tree moth has been an invasive pest that we've dealt with and spent a lot of time on this last year. A significant threat to ornamental shrubbery and products across the state. Our team worked with 379 nurseries and 2,671 dealers in the southeast area of Michigan this year, infecting quarantines to control this invasive pest. As you might imagine, there's a lot of legwork that goes on with that, a lot of coordination with partners, a lot of education of explaining the importance of why we need to be dedicating efforts to controlling invasive pests like this. We do a lot of various work in a wide variety of areas, protecting the environment beyond just this. And finally, emergency response. This has been an area that the department has continued to ramp up, and I'll say too that we really set a national bar for our ability to respond to emergencies as they develop, whether it's more HPAI, avian influenza across the state, whether it's the emergence of invasive pests, whether it's emerging contaminants that we increasingly find across the state. The work that the department has dedicated for a long time to ramping up this area has been a significant benefit and I think is seen as a real asset for stakeholders across the state. Our priorities. This is really a reflection of how we double down on what makes Michigan special, makes Michigan unique, responds to the challenges that look to present barriers to Michigan agriculture in the near, short, and long term. We're spending a lot of work on framing a lot of our work around climate resiliency. Resiliency in general, especially exacerbated on the back end of the pandemic here, that has really shown that the fact that we don't have resiliency in a lot of our systems in the way that we might hope. We're increasingly susceptible to extreme weather, and it creates real challenges of how we're developing resilient and flexible production systems long term. That Michigan's a state that's got a lot of specialty crop production. We've made a real name for ourselves of growing food here in the state. So ensuring that we've got production systems that can handle increasingly erratic weather patterns, short-term droughts, temperature swings across the state, I think is a reflection of what makes Michigan special and how we continue to have thriving industries across the state. We're spending a lot of time talking about diversity in agricultural production. Again, that specifically interfaces with what specialty crop production looks like in Michigan. But it's also a reflection of the value of who is growing our food and who is represented within the food system, who has opportunities to further economic prosperity by participating in the agricultural and food system. We're talking a lot about economic prosperity across Michigan, that if you want to drive rural economies, there's no better place to do that than agriculture. We drive a lot of urban economies as well. We have a lot of food processing capacity through urban areas across Michigan. We have real opportunities to drive quality of life for people all across the state in communities through the work that we're doing in agriculture. But drawing those hard and fast lines of the fact that we improve quality of life for people of Michigan through agriculture, that this is a pathway to double down on what makes us special and to improve economic prosperity, I think is something to highlight for us. And finally, we're going to continue to make MDARD the best place in state government to work. We have a lot of employees that are tirelessly dedicated to the work of agriculture. People want to be associated with agriculture. We have a lot of staff on our team here that take a lot of self-definition from the fact of their continued to work in agriculture. We have a lot of emails that go around on nights and weekends, and people are dedicated to continuing to advance this work. And so in turn, look, we're going to be continued supportive of doing what we can to make MDARD the best place in state government to work. To that end, we've done some work over the last year of realigning our department into a new bureau structure. A few different pieces of this. We're now operating within a system. You might recall in the past we operated within 6 divisions. We've realigned this into 4 bureaus. It was important work to align programs together in a more meaningful way, to break down silos, to lump things together in a way that people are talking to one another and making sure that we're kind of sharing best management practices internally. it's created some real leadership opportunities internally for us. Within a bureau structure like this, the bureaus are now led by level 18s. That's a structure that is consistent with most of the other state departments. In the past, we had 17-level people leading our divisions. And the fact of the matter was, if you were interested in advancing your career and you exhibited really strong leadership capabilities, you went to work somewhere else to level up. This move into the bureau structure has had the opportunity for us to create more leadership opportunities within the department and to continue to build the leadership capacity of what the department can offer for the future of Michigan agriculture. We've undertaken some staffing additions within this as well, and some realignments of folks. Dr. Nora Weiland, our state veterinarian, is operating out of the executive office now in a move that is specifically intended to elevate the role of science at the department. So in the past, the state veterinarian led our animal industries division. Our chief veterinarian, our state veterinarian now, is dedicated to do state veterinarian things 100% now. We're in the process of hiring a chief science officer so that we've got deep-seated scientific expertise helping us craft programs and policies within the department. We're ramping up what we're able to do in community engagement. We've welcomed Nate Engel back from a stint over in the governor's office, and he's doing a lot of work with constituent services, interfacing with stakeholders, making sure that we're doing all that we can to do to listen and to hear from stakeholders across the state of how our department can best serve the state. I wanted to make sure we touched on the governor's priorities here as well, because at first blush here, you don't see cows or corn mentioned in any of this. But there are an awful lot of priorities here that are well aligned with the work that we're dedicated to doing on a daily basis here at the department. And I think it's an important recognition of how agriculture plays in advancing these really broad, overarching challenges that we have in the state and opportunities to double down on improving quality of life. You would be hard-pressed to find an industry that does more around the work of making it in Michigan. Like, we are a state that grows things and makes things. But we're also a state that grows food in a way that few other states do. And when we look at how we link up to building more fair and equitable systems, to how we have healthy people in the state, how we lower costs for families and businesses, agriculture is a vehicle to do all this sort of work. So we're having specific talking points and discussions with stakeholders about how this looks like in practice and how agriculture becomes a more definitive means to address these sorts of things, and people can see themselves reflected increasingly in the work that we do, and why this matters beyond just farms and ag businesses across the state. A few details on our recommended budget then. You'll see here that the governor has recommended our total budget of $144.2 million, over 50% in general fund, and all this is ongoing funding into the future here. A third of our budget at $46.8 million is made up of restricted funding, and you'll see that a significant component of our annual appropriations comes through federal funds as well. To break it down to program areas then, you'll see that the work here within the framework of this new bureau structure, the largest items that we continue to have are around food safety and animal health. As you're aware, that we do an awful lot of work on dairy farms and food systems, food processors, ensuring the health and safety of our food supply. We have robust capacities in dealing with the emerging diseases like HPAI, and so that's reflective of the relative importance within our budget. We do a lot of work in ag development, as I've talked about, specifically supporting food and agricultural businesses in the state. It's important noting that just the general work we do in laboratory and consumer protection. I think folks probably look at with curiosity of the fact that Department of Ag stickers on all the gas pumps across the state, but it really only kind of scratches the surface of the extent to which we do consumer protection, of making sure that we're into stores of weighing out fruit cups and things like this to make sure that folks are getting the fair value of food products they buy, making sure that we're doing work to help control costs and ensuring consumer safety and protection in a lot of different areas across the state here. To briefly touch on investments then, you'll see in the governor's proposed budget the creation of agricultural environmental assurance teams. Important to note, a cost-neutral budget item here, but the creation of 24 FTEs internally within the department. And largely this is work within reallocating of how we invest freshwater protection funds across the state to deliver conservation across, really across the state here. Currently, we allocate funding within conservation districts on a contract basis to fund 38 MEP technicians across the state. A consistent barrier that we've heard from stakeholders, certainly folks that are intricately involved in the MEP program, but more broadly around what conservation district funding looks like, conservation delivery looks like, is the poor retention times and our inability to keep staff in these increasingly important areas. Our median tenure within the MEP technicians currently is 2 years. We have a few MEP techs that have been on the job a long, long time, but the vast majority of folks continue to see this as an entry-level position to their careers, positions that probably aren't adequately compensated and typically do not receive benefits. So directly, this is a work that addresses that chief limitation of upping the pay, bringing folks on as state of Michigan employees so we can extend benefits and living wages. Important to note here, too, that we're envisioning this as continued statewide coverage of conservation delivery across the state, remote work positions that are still going to be deeply embedded into conservation district and NRCS offices, working with agricultural stakeholders across the state. But it's a reflection of the fact that a chief area of advancing economics on farms moving forward is going to be delivering on environmental outcomes, to be building out just the value of what farms can deliver to the challenges of tomorrow, and making sure that we've got highly trained, long-tenured, adequately compensated staff to be able to implement conservation across the state. And then our farm-to-family program included within this as well. Really kind of aspirational work that we see it of again, reflective of the fact that there's opportunities to continue to grow farms by talking about the benefits that we're generating. People increasingly care how and where their food is grown, and this is a state that is uniquely positioned to continue to grow food. And as we look to expand the opportunities of how to grow your farm beyond just consolidating and adding more acres, it's adding on higher value crops and tying that into a way that interfaces with the food system and interfaces with addressing the health of people, continuing to add economic opportunities through handling and distribution and processing of food. So we tend to, a lot of times, I believe in agriculture, kind of silo our efforts again. And we work on supporting farm development and the expansion of what you can do on farms within the context of farms. And we do some work in food distribution and processing, but siloed efforts, right? At the same time, we look around and we increasingly have unhealthy people that don't have access to food. And that's true in urban areas, it's true in rural areas as well. This proposal specifically is work that seeks to link all these sorts of things together and draw bright lines of the fact that the food produced on farms can't be done in the way that oftentimes people want to because there isn't processing and there isn't distribution. It's especially apropos with the announced closure of Cherry Capital Foods a couple months ago. That really has been a reflection of the fact that we have a broken food distribution system that's supporting small and medium-sized farms here in the state. And we've had a really segregated approach to how we distribute food across the state and how we feed families. So this is work that allows us to be a convener in that space in the ways that we probably haven't in the past, to provide some economic structure of building out what that capacity looks like. But again, having the clear end goal here of the fact of we are going to be a state that has increased economic opportunities on farms if we are doing a better job of feeding people and making sure that we have food access in urban and rural areas and underserved communities across the state. So We're excited about how this work directly addresses the governor's priorities, but it's really a fundamental piece of how we deliver success within agriculture across the state here. A few technical adjustments then as well. We talked a little bit about bureau realignment, and you'll see that our budget then is reflective of this new structure around a bureau system. So that's listed here. The transfer of our Office of Rural Development to Leo under Executive Order 2023-6. The Office of Rural Development was renamed to the Office of Rural Prosperity and transferred over to Leo effective December 1st. But from a clean-cut budget perspective, the budget didn't officially move over until the fiscal year 2025. So this is back-end kind of cleaning up some of the fiscal aspects of the transfer of that office over to Leo. We have included in the proposed budget an increase of $600,000 in federal funds for emergency management. So again, creating the framework here for us to continue to receive in federal funds for this important area. And lastly, an increase in restricted fund allocation of $335,000 of our unclassified positions at the department. This move puts us up on par of what other departments have for allocation of unclassified positions. And really, this reduced funding levels impeded us in bringing in important leadership roles moving forward within the department of how we just exhibit leadership and respond on a statewide basis. So with that, I think that gets through the meat of what we wanted to share with you today. Happy to entertain a few questions. And Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present here today.
Thank you for the presentation. Members, do we have any questions? Representative?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Appreciate you, Director, for being here today. Just wanted to highlight something for everybody who's listening. The Director came to my district as well as Redmond Falls District to take a couple tours of some urban farming that is going on in our neck of the woods. And for those folks who don't know as well, Detroit lost its only food co-op back in the early 2000s. It used to be called the Cass Corridor Food Co-op. But starting in May, this upcoming May, we got some good news. There's some black urban farmers who are opening up their own food co-op in Detroit, in the Newson area off of Woodward. And I want to just highlight something, and that is we should be supporting food co-ops throughout the state to really support those small to mid-sized farmers, whether it's in the rural parts of Michigan or even in the urban corridors in my neighborhood and the district I represent. So if you could shed any light, or we could talk offline about it, but we need to support these food co-ops because I think that's really where we need to go to make sure that distribution is there. So anything you want to say to that, Director, go right ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're a state that grows food, right? I mean, that these aren't continuing to build up the capacity for distribution and the linkages to how we address these like existential problems of the health of people, right? Of the costs that are increasingly being borne of what food looks like today, right? Of how expensive it is to put healthy food on the table. Like this is a response to the needs that we continue to hear from stakeholders, right? In urban and rural areas. This builds demand, right? This is how you grow your farm in an additional way. And I think there is opportunity to continue to value the social and the cultural aspects of what farms mean to communities. The growing food is a visceral to the definition of people and communities. And so in an area that we've continued to prioritize consolidation and production of volume, I would argue without enough recognition of the value, everything else that comes along within this. This is an area to double down on what makes us unique, and I think it's investments in people moving forward of linking these pieces together in a way that we've moved away from doing a little bit.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Representative Mentzer?
Thank you very much. We heard in the DNR presentation about visits to state parks, and quite frankly, I think we need fourth grade visits to farms. I happen to be, in my community, I was the president of the Mount Clemens Optimist Club, and one of our local elementary schools came to us and they wanted to grow things with the children, right? Elementary school. And so we bought, raised beds and tools and seeds and plants and all kinds of things. And so over the summer, they were growing some tomatoes. And the kids were able to watch these tomatoes go from little green things to little yellow things to pink to red. And as the tomatoes were harvested, one of the children refused to eat them because he didn't believe that they were tomatoes, because you buy tomatoes at Meijer's. Wow. So he had absolutely no idea, even though we spent the school year growing and nurturing and planting and watering and fertilizing and looking at them. He had no recognition of the fact that a red tomato that you eat grows on a plant. He thought that they came from Meijer's, just like you buy a can. So I would really be an advocate for fourth graders to go out into farms and see what's really going on.
I appreciate. I actually had discussions with other states over the last couple weeks here around other departments in other states of working to prioritize this, right? Of get young children connected with farms. What you're highlighting here, though, touches on this broader theme that we continue to hear within agriculture, right? Of the fact that people are divorced from their food system, they don't understand what goes on in farms. A lot of concern of the fact that less than 2% of the population is involved in production agriculture today. But I think it's an opportunity to stop and look at too of this is the results of the systems that we've stood up over the last 30, 40 years, and this move towards get bigger, get out within agriculture, right? In a state like Michigan, that we had such an economic boom of factory work here over the last 100 years, right? And it became a path to economic prosperity for so many on small farms to work within factories. But a generation ago, there was a definitive pathway here to work at Steering Gear in Saginaw, right? And still run your grandfather's 80-acre farm. And stay connected in agriculture. And this was wealth advancement for a lot of families as well, right? Of to have secondary income and to be involved in agriculture while still having an off-the-farm job. So the census came out last week. And so it's an opportunity to look at, kind of take a snapshot in time of what farms look like across the state. If you go back 25 years, we have lost 1.8 million farms between the size of 100 and 1,000 acres, right? A medium-sized farm. And these were the sized farms where somebody might have a job in town and still be engaged in production agriculture in some ways. At the same time, we've seen a 315% increase in farms over 5,000 acres. And so this is, you grow your farm today by expanding. And you add acres, and you add head, you simplify management, you mitigate risk. The big get bigger. And as a result, we've had this system where it's get bigger, get out. And the end result is the fact that we have a lot of people today that aren't connected with the food system in any way. And it's kind of a sad assessment of where our program is, of the fact that fourth grade trips to schools like this to teach people what tomatoes look like are so impactful and are so necessary. There's a path to growing farms into the future of continuing to value the value that they bring to communities, right? With environmental outcomes, to plug this into corporate sustainability pledges, to advance the level of management we have on farms today of how much that we are compensating growers for the value of what they're doing besides just the weight of corn they happen to move out in a semi off the field. And so that's really broad overarching work that we're attempting to do in the department. Some of that's reflective of our shifts and what we want to do with conservation delivery. But that kind of work that you're talking about there really is overarching work that we're hoping to implement in every segment of what we do today.
Thank you very much. And if I may ask one more question, Chair, thank you. So I read an article recently that talked about the lack of snow cover here and the effect it has on the soil. That when the soil freezes, the microbes don't do what they do to create the nutrients to keep the soil rich and fertile. So with these kind of environmental changes that are happening and that will continue to happen, what are you looking at to help combat that? I know that's a kind of a loaded, weird question, but.
We've got another couple hours, right?
Okay.
No, I think there are short-term challenges in mitigating the impacts of climate change, right? What you're talking about of the snow cover, the freezing temperatures, has direct bearings on how we increasingly manage water. So it's water infiltration, it's water holding capacity. We tend to get about the same amount of precipitation we've gotten in the past. It just comes in a lot more intense periods. And so mitigating how water flows within systems is really important to preventing flooding in Grand Rapids. But it's important long-term of how we institute risk mitigation processes like crop insurance. The cost of crop insurance is going to continue to get higher and higher as we try to mitigate and implement risk mitigation. So again, this underscores the work of what we're trying to do and focus on more regenerative agriculture, more biological capacity of soils, investing in the quality of farmland that we have today, and understanding that this is a flow-through economically as well for farmers. The more carbon you have in soil, the more resilient your soil is going to be of how we deal with increasingly extreme weather. But all of this makes farming more difficult. When you talk about in one year we might have ample snowfall and really significant freeze-thaw events, and the next year we have very little snowfall and the ground never really freezes. That's going to result in different management requirements from farmers the next spring of how you're implementing no-till and cover crops and nutrient management plans for that instance. It underscores the need for highly trained and competent conservation delivery individuals to help farmers to work on this. That farms are microcosm small businesses here. And there's a priority placed, I think, on the behalf of farmers of being able to do it all. But increasingly, you're asking farmers to implement increasingly difficult management practices under the face of shifting weather and climate conditions. There's the need here to be outsourcing expertise and to have recommendations and assistance to help folks do this. The fact that we're going to continue to deal with these extreme weather patterns is going to underscore the fact that we need to continue to invest in conservation professionals across the state in a wide variety of capacities moving forward.
Thank you, Director Boring, and thank you, Representative, for your questions. Representative Alexander?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and also thank you, Mr. Boring, Director, for your presentation. I'm kind of excited about a slide that you have in here, and as a meat verified farmer myself, I stress the importance of this program. You had a slide in here that says that we got 24 added FTEs to increase, and it also says it's a neutral budget adjustment. I've seen meat under fire before. Can you explain how we come to that, where the funding comes from?
Currently today, we're allocating $3 million to 38 contracts, right, within MEAP technicians in districts. The average funding for those is $76,000, give or take. Around 20% of that goes to administrative overhead within the district. Another, at least like $56,000 or so to cover the MEAP tech and all the corresponding costs associated with this. So as you might surmise, right, in today's budget and job environment, that doesn't go very far. And I think that's reflective of the fact that our median retention time is so short within MEAP technicians. The move to bring folks in-house immediately addresses the concern of how we adequately compensate people and create career positions within conservation delivery. But I think it's also reflective of the fact of how we need to adequately position MEAP in our efforts to mitigate environmental issues in front of us today and help farmers double down and continue to expand and grow. MEAP in a lot of ways is entry-level conservation, right? These are practices that as a farmer, everybody should be doing. When we look to how we start to capitalize on carbon markets in a different way and to build in regenerative ag programming that ideally in the future, you get paid more per bushel of corn at the elevator because you've demonstrated that you've applied less nitrogen and you've mitigated greenhouse gas emissions and you've controlled water in a more meaningful way on the farm. That becomes really advanced management kind of work. And I think underscores the need for the capacity of people to be partnering on this. So the proposal ends up being the fact that we're looking to have MEAP technicians operate under a state of Michigan umbrella here, still delivering statewide implementation and coverage across the state, but building the capacity of what we're able to do within conservation delivery moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great program.
Director, following up that, would the in-house positions, what kind of positions would the in-house positions be?
Conservation delivery experts, right? Conservation delivery technical staff. And I think it is important to note that a move like this isn't intended to be an assault on MEAP or put MEAP under fire in any way. But I think it's reflective of the fact that we have to be doing more to implement environmental practices with an eye on this is the path to economically grow on your farm, beyond just what we're doing now. USDA is investing $3 billion into the development of a regenerative ag programming through their Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities program of paying farmers more for the environmental outcomes of growing products in a more management-intensive way. I expect there to be significant opportunity to expand of how we grow farms into the future within this. And I think building up the capacity for what we can do of implementing programs like that into the future, implementing the capacity of what we can do within our regenerative ag programming work that we're standing up, of how we deliver that across the state, I think becomes really important capacity building. So it sets the foundation for us to be able to do more into the future.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing no further business, we are adjourned.